Let me
Yes.
try. Okay, is it moving now?
Yes. 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 Now. Yes, it is moving now.
Okay, my apologies. Um,
No
so
worries.
we're talking about two common reasons for language endangerment. One of them is that we have very few speakers of a language, a particular language. That's very common. And then there is also another very common reason, powerful reason, strong reason, where many children, even though there are many speakers, do not learn the language of their parents because other languages are considered to be more important. You will see many languages that have millions of speakers, but the younger generation are not learning the mother tongue or the heritage language. Pakistan, as most of you know, is a linguistically very diverse country. You might have seen this map several times, this linguistic map several times. From the 200 million people of in Pakistan, about there are about 200 million people speak about 72 or 70 up to 75, or some people would say 80 languages. And these are some of the numbers. Hopefully you can still see the screen, right? Languages of Pakistan.
Yes, we do.
Okay. So these are the numbers that you may be familiar with for some of the major languages like Hindko, Urdu, Pashto, Seraiki, Brahui, Balochi, Sindhi, and Punjabi. And most of these have millions of speakers, between 2 million and almost 60 million. 2 million for Hindko, Punjabi has around 60 million. So about 75 or up to 80 or around that number, there are that many languages spoken in Pakistan. 65 of these languages are regional, 7 languages, including Urdu, the regional language, national language, lingua franca, and English are used as official languages in 4 provinces. According to the official figures, most widely spoken languages in Pakistan is Punjabi, followed by Pashto, Sindhi, and most of you already know this information. I'm just repeating it. Other major languages are Balochi, Hindko, Brahui, and Kashmiri. So around 27 languages spoken in northern Pakistan or northern areas of Pakistan, Kashmir, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and surrounding border areas of Pakistan are facing extinction. Um, so the just a brief overview of the field of documentary linguistics. I think documentary linguistics now sort of picking up in Pakistan. Many people have been talking about it a lot, and many people are trying to do different types of efforts, both individually in collaboration with other people, native speakers, language activists, and also linguists. Um, but what is documentary linguistics? It is a newly emerging, not very newly emerging, but it is an emerging field. It's been picking up in the last decade or more with a very strong velocity, I think. Um, an emerging field of linguistic inquiry and research to document, preserve, and revitalize endangered languages. Most of the focus so far has been on documentation and preservation. Revitalization hasn't been much of an emphasis in the field, but it is becoming more and more stronger, the emphasis on revitalizing these languages based on the interest of the native speakers of these languages. And it varies from place to place, context to context. The field started as a resurgent interest in linguistic fieldwork during the late 20th century and is largely linked to the cause of documenting and describing endangered languages. Taking advantage of the latest state-of-the-art technologies, many documentary linguists across the world are making efforts towards documenting and recording oral and written linguistic traditions, which could be in different genres, translating and annotating documentation materials, compiling grammatical descriptions, dictionaries, and text collections, preparing pedagogical materials or teaching materials for language teaching and learning for the ethnic population which claims the ownership of the language, any particular language. Hopefully you can still see my slides. So the
Yes, we
objective
do.
of documentary linguistics primarily pertains to the collection, transcription, and translation of primary linguistic data. And secondarily, a low-level descriptive analysis of these data. So the primary focus of documentary linguistics is collection, transcription, and translation of primary linguistic data. It's not necessarily analysis, but analysis is a secondary aspect. It is very, very closely related to and often understood as part of another activity, the descriptive activity, where the end product is a language description. It goes hand in hand with documentation, generally in the form of a grammar dictionary. You must have seen a lot of these grammar dictionary text collections. It's become a typical product for any documentation project, but it's not primarily documentation focused. It's focused on description and analysis of the language that is being documented. So the latter activity, or these activities that produce grammars, dictionaries, and text collections, are central to another well-established field of linguistics, which is called descriptive linguistics. However, describing a language need not be synonymous with documenting a language, and that's what Himmelman in 1998 proposed said. These are different in different ways. So methodologies can be different. The two activities can substantially differ in terms of their methodological issues like reliability, naturalness, representativeness of the data, breadth of the data. Procedures can be different in putting together a data sample for documentation purposes, may include participant observation, elicitation, recording, transcription, and translation of the primary data. In case of language description, the procedures include phonetic, phonological, morphological, syntactic, semantic analysis, which may include spectrograms, distribution tests, and so on. And many documentation projects have this incorporated into them. The results of the two activities may differ in terms of their immediate products. Documentation of primary data may result in a corpus of utterances. Many of the documentation projects entail the creation of archives or corpora of data, primary data, recordings, audio recordings, video recordings, field notes, speaker observations, comments by speakers, and the compiler or field worker on the use of particular linguistic constructions. And descriptive activity may lead to statements of sorts about the use of a grammatical segment formally expressed by, for example, a suffix such as mo, demonstrated by one or two examples. But as I said earlier, all of these are often incorporated into a documentation project. So despite their differences in the areas of methodologies, procedures, and end results, the two activities are closely interrelated and partially overlap. However, language documentation nowadays is conceived of as an independent field of linguistics, which is no longer exclusively related to descriptive linguistics. That means descriptive linguistics may or may not be included in that, or may not involve. Some documentation projects may not have that component. So the activities involved in a documentation or language documentation project include data collection, field recordings of both natural data and elicitation sessions, then transcribing, translating, and analyzing the linguistic data, typing the text on the computer using a Unicode compliant format, which is a very, very humongous job, but it can be quite a challenge. Parsing, interlinearization of text with detailed grammatical information, analyzing text for ethnolinguistic information, preparing grammatical descriptions, text collections, dictionaries, digitizing audio and video recordings, and preparing audio and video files. So you can see this is already a long list. And then archiving the materials for documentation and preservation. This is very important for each documentation project. And finally, in the red color, I have creating pedagogical materials for language revival and language revitalization. And as I mentioned before, many documentation projects which have had funding of like national or international organizations, do not have a very strong focus on pedagogical materials, creating pedagogical materials for language revival and language revitalization. This hasn't been the primary focus of documentation projects in the, especially in the past. But I think this particular aspect is now gaining some traction among linguists as well as language communities and language activists, because this is something that's more important for the communities. They feel this is very important. But this may differ from community to community depending on language ideologies and how they view or perceive their own language with respect to other languages, whether or not they do see the need or any fruitful outcomes out of these attempts of language revival or revitalization in case of minority or dying languages. I wanted to talk a little about issues and challenges in this exercise, in both language documentation and revitalization, but more focus on revitalization today. I've talked a lot about the documentation before, so I wanted to talk something new today. Decisions related to the selection and of the type of data to be collected or included in the documentation. What should we record or what should we collect? What needs to be done? What's more important for in terms of what the goals of the project are, or the end products or outcomes? The actual recordings of the data and issues related to fieldwork, depending on where we are collecting the data or where we are recording the data, there could be a variety of problems where you are. It could be as simple as charging a recorder in time or a device in time or something else. Non-availability of people, many different things, many different reasons, possibilities. Transcription, translation, analysis, and commentary of the data, how detailed, how narrow transcription should be, how many times do we need to assess the translation, how deep the analysis should be, how detailed the commentary of the data should be, and so on. Archiving and presentation of data, decisions related to that for public access and storage. And finally, issues in language revitalization. Most of the ones that are at the top are related to documentation and preservation. But how do we achieve language revitalization? I've used this this resource, and I think anyone who's interested in revitalization efforts, especially with respect to the use of technology, can read this article. It's available online. Revitalizing Endangered Languages, a practical guide, edited by Justina Olko and Julia Salabank. I thought it was very reader friendly, and it's also accessible on the internet. So what are the different issues or challenges or things to consider for use of technology? And we also need to keep in mind that use of technology is context-based. That means use of technology in a place like USA may not be, may be much more much easier than use of technology in a place in a remote area. Well, we have remote areas here as well, but it is context-based. There can be different approaches to how we use technology. It could be, these could be app-driven or tool-driven, where the priority is on the technology itself, and the language learning or learning needs are in the background. And then there could be the needs-based approach. We could use the need-based approach, which is the better approach, which prioritizes the needs. And it must, but this must be very innovative in approaching language teaching and pedagogy. it must be modern because we have to keep pace with the changing times. And we have to make sure that we are using the right kind of technology. So the approach that we choose should be both principled and need-based. So I'm going to give some details of that. I'm going to expand on that. For instance, if we want to make audio recordings, so what kind of tools do we have, and which ones are the best? I'm not sure if you're familiar with Audacity. It's a very easy to use program. It's free. It can be used for recordings. It can be used for editing audio recordings in a very high quality format, WAV format, and it's free. So it's very user friendly. It's not very difficult. It's just very easy to use. And then I came across this thing called Vocaro. I've never used it, but it's an online recording program. Then you also have cell phones or smartphones which come with preloaded apps, which have things like voice recorder, voice memos, and things like that. And they also give you good quality recording. So based on what you have, or what is your what do you have access to, you can choose what is best. For example, decide which one works best for a specific learning context. We must weigh in the pros and cons of each potential available tool. Here's an example. If we have a classroom and we have students learning a language, and they only have access to one computer in the classroom, then we cannot use Audacity because it has to be used on a computer. Then we have option 2. Again, this needs to be downloaded, and it's not very good. It's not good for phones. So the option 3 is really the easiest one, even if Audacity would be the best otherwise. For editing and other purposes. I'm not sure if these cell phone devices have these voice recording devices, or the programs, whatever they are called, apps, or can be easily used for editing and other purposes. But they are easily accessible. Then if you, again, this depends on what access do you have, what kind of access do you have to technology. If you do want to use a lot of technology, and I think that's the best thing to do in the modern times, building online language teaching materials. That's happening a lot, especially in the pandemic times. We have learned that we really are now more and more relying on online materials. So this tool is really very important, or this platform. So what tools to use for example, if we want to have websites for these materials? And what are their pros and cons? There are some examples here. Google Sites, it's free, easy to use. You can invite people to view the website and control its use. But the con here is that it requires maintenance of user permission list, adding, deleting people from time to time. So it is time consuming, and it needs a lot of maintenance. Then there's something called Wix. I'm not sure how how familiar you are with that. It's nice and easy to build, but it requires you to use their domain name, and it involves charges as well. And it also contains ads, which we don't want most of the time, especially for educational materials. WordPress, I find WordPress very, very user-friendly. I have been using WordPress for almost a decade now. I started using it for Burushaski language that I've been working on for a long time. So I have a website for this language, which you might want to take a look at if you're interested in. It's called burushaskilanguage.com. You do have, if you want good website, then charges are involved. They do have some free options as well, but that's not they don't have many options in terms of flexibility of different I mean, it doesn't give you a lot of options. It's very restricted in terms of how it looks and what you can project there. So if you do pay, it's not very expensive, but it does give you a lot of options. So it allows more flexibility in terms of hosting, domain names, and you can easily host audio files, etc. on this. So I think it's the best option, WordPress, in terms of using a website for your own, building your online teaching materials for any language. And the next thing or issue is the skills that you have. You can't use technology unless you're familiar with it. So the necessary skill set that we need is the knowledge of these essential tools for better performance. I will explain it a little more. Then the ability to integrate tools and technology into the classroom or curriculum. This is very important because then you can get better results. It can be used to foster language learning or speed language learning and to better share knowledge if you incorporate tools and technology into classrooms or into curriculum. Incorporation of technology into assessments and getting feedback and record keeping and etc. And then use of technology to improve communication and collaboration for opportunities. That's also another positive aspect of it. So the knowledge of essential tools involves many different things. You need to know what processing programs are best for your goals. There are many different options, and I think the most widely used Word, Google Docs is also very common now. I don't use OpenOffice, but that's another option. Then the next one is presentation and dissemination. These kinds of programs, PowerPoint, are used. People have used Keynote and Prezi. I don't use them, but I use PowerPoint. Spreadsheets, Excel sheets, Google Sheets is getting very, very popular. Open Office Calc. I don't use this one, but this is another option. I guess Excel and Google Sheets work very well. Audio playback programs, you're mostly familiar with these, Windows Media Player, QuickTime, etc. I think Windows Media is kind of all time. It's been used for a long time. VLC also, QuickTime as well. Then there are search engines. Many search engines are there, Chrome, Firefox, Safari. But the question is, are they appropriate for the purpose that we're using them for? If we have children in the classroom, are they appropriate for them? Are they age appropriate? I came across this place called Internet Safety. Some safe search engines for children are listed there. What kind of search engines are safe for children? Again, we must weigh in the pros and cons for each of these options. So in terms of integrating technology in teaching and assessment, we need to identify the learning goals and objectives and set the curriculum accordingly. Integrate the use of technology in assignments, projects. For example, if you give an assignment or project, there's someone trying to enter. Can you admit them?
I did.
Okay, it's still showing admin. If we give an assignment in a classroom, can we incorporate some use of technology in those assignments or projects so that they get more familiar with the use of technology and create materials also in doing that, in doing those activities, very small activities. For example, a type of recording technology that can be used in the classroom, creating some recordings and stuff like that. A teacher or language revitalizer should be comfortable and familiar with the technology. in addressing troubleshoots and finding workarounds for problems. So that means testing the technology before using that in classroom is very important. The goal is to achieve 4 common skills that we all know in language learning in the most effective way. That includes listening, speaking, reading, and writing abilities. And there can be different tools for each of these that are appropriate for improving these or learning any of these, or a combination of different ones. So how do we evaluate potential technology, on what basis? There are certain general issues and there are also certain specific issues. So general issues relate to budget, cost effectiveness, things like that. There are some free and open source tools that we may consider if we don't have a lot of budget. And I already talked about some of those. How easy are they to use and learn? Can we learn to use them very easily, or are they very complicated? Then efficiency, powerfulness, or effectiveness of these tools, how good are they in terms of quality and long-term use? We know that technology keeps changing every other day, and sometimes someone used the term digital dark age, which means that, for instance, when I went to fieldwork in 2003, my first field trip, we used, at that time, we were still using audio tape recorders, those, what are they called? I forgot. Anyways, those tape recorders and then videotapes and stuff like that. Every year I used to go to the next field trip. There were some new things in the market, and there were new recommendations for recording. There's one more person trying to enter. We have to think about the long-term efficiency and effectiveness of the tools and how we can work with the data and preserve the data and be able to use it at a later stage. Dissemination, preservation, many of these things need to be considered. So specific issues also include appropriateness to the age of the users, appropriateness to the people of a specific culture, and compatibility. Compatibility, for instance, in terms of compatibility of fonts to the orthography of a specific language. This has been a very, very challenging aspect in terms of trying to write down a language. For instance, I've been working with Burshaski and Kashmiri for many years. And for all these years, I've come across this orthography issue. And I know that many of you who are already working on some languages are facing this issue. Every year there are workshops on orthography in Pakistan, and we talk about different issues of orthography, and it's been a challenge. It's been an ongoing challenge for many people. Orthography, use of fonts, and selection of scripts. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. In a bit. So one more thing before that I want to talk about is the safety and privacy and ownership issues. I'll briefly go through this, and then I'll talk a little bit about the orthography issues. So while many social media tools such as Facebook can be used for language learning and communication, I see a lot of people using these for posting language learning materials and stuff like that, but they may not be appropriate for children. Nowadays, we see that children are using more and more technology, and because of the pandemic, again, more and more children are doing online learning. But Facebook may not be the right platform for children. So they need to be protected from, for instance, the cheesier effects of the internet. I use the word cheesier effects, but I don't know, maybe you can use a different word. They use the word seedier effects. So anyway, education-specific tools such as Edmodo, it's a global education network. are considered to be more appropriate for needs related to kids in terms of their internet use. Drafting general guidelines for learners, for example, making student communication public, separating professional and personal accounts, using official equipment for communication, avoiding publication of personal information, stuff like that. Then also about the ownership and control of the data. When we collect the data, who controls it? We have to take care, and the care needs to be taken, that the ownership remains with the community. And here's where we talk about ebooks. Ebooks have been they're getting more and more popular in language teaching material, in terms of language teaching materials. There are many available tools for creating ebooks. I came across this one called iBooks Author. It used to be used in the recent past, but it's not available any longer, or has gone out of use. It has transitioned to something called Pages, which is compatible with iPad, iPhone, Mac, and iCloud, but not everything. So another option is PowerPoint. Again, I love PowerPoint, and I think it's very, very user-friendly. So PowerPoint has a lot of functions, so we can use that to create ebooks also, and we can use it to create ebooks in a PDF format, portable document format, whatever. And it's the most common ebook format. It's very, very friendly, user-friendly, and easily available on many devices. And the best thing about it, it's free. There's also Adobe InDesign, but it's not free. You have to pay for it. I've been exploring Adobe Creative Cloud for the last few months, and it has a lot of options for video, audio, media, different types of media. It gives you a lot of different options. I'm trying to learn some of the things in Adobe Creative Cloud, video editing and other things. So that was ebooks, but related to audio recordings, I already talked about it briefly. I love Audacity. I think it's very, very user-friendly. I have never used these other things, but I do sometimes use my phone because it's very handy. It's a very handy tool, and it's in your hand all the time, wherever you go. And you can make some good quality recordings on your phone as well. But then again, you cannot do editing and stuff like that. They are good, but I guess Audacity is better if you want even better quality and you want to edit them and all that. But field linguists mostly use high-tech devices, like there's this recorder called the Zoom H6 or something like that. I do have that. I've been using it. But Audacity can be used for editing, and it's very, very handy. It can be used in a classroom or lab, anywhere. Just open the program, open your computer, and start recording, or you can import files recorded by some other devices as well. And then you can edit them. There are certain animation tools as well. Some are listed here. I have never used animation, but if you're interested, some of them are listed here. These are considered to be easy platforms: Woki, Sock Puppets, Go Animate. Children love animation, so if you want to create language learning materials for children and motivate them to learn a language which is not very, it's not a dominant language, and I think animation could be really very, very, very effective way to teach them a language that may not otherwise have a lot of popularity. I've seen, my daughter is learning Korean animation. She's been watching Korean animation, and I saw videos on Korean animation, people in different countries. It's very popular now in the younger generation, especially. So animation is a very, very effective tool for language learning for children, especially. I think younger generation. Videos are the most powerful. They work really well, but they are very time consuming to create. They also need some training, but they're very effective. If you can do it, if you can make language learning videos, which are creative also, they have to be creative. Otherwise, it gets very boring and people don't like to watch those videos. There are tools for video creation and editing. Windows Media Maker. I have not used that. iMovie, movie editing in the cloud. So you have different options. I love Adobe Creative Cloud again, as I said, but it's paid. It's very easy to use. It's very, very creative, and it gives you a lot of options. You could create very good videos through editing in Adobe Creative Cloud. I've been learning to use it last few months, a couple months. Finally, I really did want to talk about orthographic issues. How much time do I have? Okay,
We have time. You can go as long as you want to.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll talk briefly about orthographic issues, potential problems with choosing various scripts. Orthography has been one of the challenging things for my projects also. I started working on Burushaski many years ago, and it seems that the orthography for Burushaski is yet to be decided what script will be used. People have had a lot of discussions over the many years that I've been I started working on Burushaski in 2003 when I was a student at UT Austin, and by the time about 6 years later, in 2006, I finished my doctoral degree in UT Austin. That was my doctoral thesis, work on a subdialect of Burushaski language. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Burushaski language. It is spoken in Hunza, Nagar, and Yasin valleys of Gilgit Baltistan region. But there are a small number of speakers, around 300 or 350 on the Indian side in Indian Kashmir, where I am originally from and where I started my research on Burushaski language. So there are about 350 speakers on that side. I wanted to look at the language change and other things, but I eventually ended up doing documentation work as well, and then it became my focal area of research. Burushaski script has been a writing system for Burushaski. Many people have actually proposed writing the alphabet for Burushaski, and there are publications in different dialects using primarily, most of these are Persian-Arabic-based writing system. Burushaski sound system is more complex than some of the other languages. It needs more symbols for dialect. For vowels. It has certain consonants which we don't have in Arabic. Other languages also have these in South Asia. So that has been an issue. So what are the main problems related to writing systems or scripts? What kind of problems do they pose? The first thing that I think is learnability. If you are proposing a new writing system or a writing system based on an existing writing system, first thing that we need to consider is learnability. How easily can people learn it? Especially in the modern times where writing and reading are now getting in the background we have more visual data. So visual audio and videos and all things like that. So writing is becoming more and more going in the background. I don't know, younger kids don't want to take a lot of effort learning new scripts. As long as they can speak something or understand it, they don't want to take a lot of effort in learning writing systems. So there's not strong motivation among the younger generation to learn scripts that they do not know already. Anyway, so the older generation also has similar issues. They, especially in like if you a country like Pakistan, many people want to use Perso-Arabic script for every single language. It's like a given that Perso-Arabic has to be used. But is it an effective writing system for all these languages? That's the question. Usability, potency in terms of computer, in terms of technology. So are we far behind? For instance, if we propose a writing system for a certain language, which is based on Perso-Arabic, and we have proposed these new symbols, diacritics for different sounds, how quickly are they available for people to use on on computers and phones? We have a time constraint. There's a fast race in technology changes, and are they easily available? How many years does it take for a new symbol to become Unicode compliant, for example? For many years, some people had proposed symbols for Burushaski and some other languages, and we still are facing problems in terms of their usability. And so that is a question that we need to consider when we are proposing writing systems or discussing writing systems for these languages, especially the languages that are not that do not have a writing system already. Then acceptance among the speakers. I've seen a lot of motivation among the younger speakers to use Roman-based alphabet, and among the older speakers of, especially in Pakistan, I'm talking about Pakistani context, they want to use the older speakers prefer the Perso-Arabic writing system. Younger speakers, younger generation, I have noticed that they are more comfortable with Roman alphabet. They want to use that. I have had conflicting preferences. Now that is ideology related to language ideology and ideology based on, I mean, what do they think about a certain writing system, how connected they feel they are with the writing system, and they're emotionally connected with Perso-Arabic, perhaps. But then there are some actual issues that I mentioned: learnability, usability. Are they appropriate for a certain writing, for a certain language? I'm going to give you examples of Kashmiri and Burushaski, and I've discussed that these two at an orthography workshop that we did a couple of years ago in Chitra, and we talked about the situation of Kashmiri. Kashmiri language is spoken by, I mean, the total number of speakers of Kashmiri is about 5 million. So it's not an endangered language. We cannot say that it is an endangered language, but it is a highly under-resourced language. I'm talking about speakers in Indian Kashmir. There are about 1 lakh or so, maybe more. I'm not sure exact number, but a total of about 5.6 million on both sides. Maybe more, but it is in millions. But there is very limited native language literacy in Kashmiri, despite the fact that Kashmiri is spoken by several million people. It has official writing system. The official writing system that was proposed many, many years ago was a Nastaliq based, the Perso-Arabic based, a modification of the Perso-Arabic writing system. So the official writing system is Perso-Arabic, for a modification of Perso-Arabic, because it does have sounds that needed to be modified, for which we needed additional symbols. Not many, but we did. The problem especially arises with the respective vowels. Vowels pose a lot of problems because Kashmiri has about 15 or 16 vowels total. And we don't have that many symbols in Perso-Arabic. I mean, Perso-Arabic is a consonantal writing system primarily. And for vowels, we use diacritics. And people do not use diacritics very consistently, and they don't use them in the same way. There is no standardization of these um, diacritics. People use whatever they want, except for a few symbols or a few diacritics. For many diacritics, people do not use them. They don't regularize the use. They sometimes they just don't use them, and they don't write them, and we have to assume. In many cases, we have to assume what is the vowel there. So for Kashmiri, there's limited native language literacy. Until very recently, it was not offered as a language in schools. But in the last few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, it was introduced in schools. There was lack of institutional support for Kashmiri language. I'm talking about Indian context. I don't think it's taught in Pakistan. I'm not sure. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. But in India or in Indian Kashmir, we have several million Kashmiri speakers. This language was not taught in schools. So most of the people were not literate in Kashmiri. They could speak it, but they were not literate. They could not read and write in Kashmiri. Until recently, and recently, a few years ago, it was introduced in schools as a one of the languages alongside English, and there's also Hindi, Urdu taught here. There's strong language ideology. Speakers belonging to the Hindu community and Muslim communities have different preferences for writing system. Even though the writing system that was officially recognized many years ago was a Perso-Arabic modification, it was not popular. I mean, as I said, people were not literate in the native language. So even if there was a writing system, it was not very popular. And then there were these literary people, poets, writers who did write in Kashmiri. But among those, most of the Muslims would use Perso-Arabic based writing system, and Hindus would prefer to use a Devanagari based writing system. And this has become more and more common in the last many years, especially after the Kashmir conflicts took a bad turn and the two communities became more and more distant from each other. So there are Hindu Kashmiris and there are Muslim Kashmiris. Hindu Kashmiris, if they write, they would prefer a Devanagari-based writing system, and the Muslims would prefer a Perso-Arabic-based writing system. If people write anything on the internet, and even when they speak, they can understand each other, but when they write, they cannot understand each other. There's a communication block. So that is a major challenge for Kashmiri. Because of migration, many people migrated out of Kashmir and settled in different places. There's been a rapid language shift in the younger generation. Many of the younger speakers do not learn their mother tongue or their heritage language. So that's been a problem with Kashmiri. In terms of technical issues with the official script, which is Nastaliq or Arabic-based, the choice of Unicode non-compliant symbols causes problems in usability. So many people use Unicode non-compliant symbols. There's no standardization, even though there is on paper, but it's not in practice. There is no standardization in practice. In the use of a large number of diacritics, which are neither learner-friendly nor computer-friendly. So this poses problems for Kashmiri literacy in terms of usability of this particular writing system, which is Arabic-based, Perso-Arabic-based. And it's been a problem that's been there for a long time now, and it hasn't found a solution. More and more younger generation people who do want to learn the language are facing this problem because this is a major problem in terms of literacy in Kashmiri language. And then we cannot communicate with speakers of the other community, Hindu and Muslim Kashmiris cannot communicate with each other unless they use something common that both of them know. They cannot communicate with each other through writings in the written form. So, as far as Burshasky is concerned, similar problems, but not exactly the same. It has, there are like 3 or 4 or many writing proposals for writing systems, and a few of them have had some traction in each of their dialects, but because there are dialectal differences, people have been working in their own with their own people in their own dialects, and there have been some disagreements about which symbols to use for certain sounds in writing for Burshasky. So again, choice of Unicode non-compliant symbols cause problems. And again, same issue of large number of diacritics with Burshasky also. It also has a number of vowels, good number of vowels, almost as many as in Kashmiri, I believe. And then it also has some remnants of what we could call tone. There are short vowels, long vowels, and some extra long vowels, or maybe that's tone, some remnants of tone, and it needs to be represented. So these issues, to represent these using the Perso-Arabic writing system causes issues because people are not using them consistently. They're not using the same symbols or same diacritics for the same phonemic or phonological units or segments. So the use of symbols that are practically redundant leave the choice of giving the choice. So sometimes what they do is they want to use symbols that are actually redundant or are not needed. For example, we have retroflex dental affricate, which is like S sound. And then it also has an aspirated counterpart, S sound. It's like, so for Urdu, in Urdu, we use the dotashim for aspirated sounds. So ka, kha, pa, pa, ta, tha. We don't need a symbol for each of those. We only need pa, ta, pa, and ta, and the voiceless one, the unaspirated ones. And then we just add this dotashim to it, and it becomes aspirated. That's a very regular thing in Urdu, and so we don't need to create new symbols for aspirated sounds which are not in Urdu. We just need a new symbol for the base unaspirated one, and then we only need one. We can add the aspirated, we can add the chashim to it, and it becomes aspirated. But they have proposed, some people have proposed additional symbols for those as well, and those are redundant, they're not needed. So these issues can be discussed. Again, even if there was a unified writing system for Burshasky across different dialects, we still face the problem of diacritics. The diacritics pose a major issue, a major problem in this writing system because many people are not using them the same way. I noticed the same issue in other languages where people have used Perso-Arabic writing system to write languages like Khwar and other languages, and they have similar issues or similar challenges. So how do we resolve them? Even after many years of attempts of standardization, they haven't become standardized through the use of these diacritics. So what could we do? Should we use any these? Should we use Perso-Arabic? Is Perso-Arabic an ideal or optimal writing system for these languages? Could we use IPA, International Phonetic Alphabet? Should we use Roman-based alphabet or English, imitate the English spelling? For example, I've seen many people trying to use Roman alphabet, but they are very, very influenced by the English spelling, and English spelling is anything but regular. It's not the ideal way to spell your language. Or should we use a modification of the Roman script, standardize that? Will it be more efficient for these languages? So what should we do? So these are some of the things that people can discuss and consider when they are proposing writing systems for languages that are especially undocumented, endangered, or that do not have writing systems yet, or do not have a standardized writing system. I guess those are the things that I wanted to talk about today. I do want to stress one more thing. What are the most potent ways of revitalization? When we talk about revitalization, we want to know what are the most potent, useful ways of revitalization. In the changing times, like we live in a time period where technology keeps changing, new things are coming, old things are becoming old, and things that we used 3 years ago become obsolete very soon. And what do we need to do? Should we use the traditional methods? Should we think about some innovative methods, creative methods? How can we motivate our children, especially the younger generation, who are more and more influenced by languages that are more powerful, especially English language? Everyone wants to learn English. It has dividends. You cannot get a job, for example, if you don't know English in this world, in this time. So how can we motivate these kids to learn their heritage languages, or how can we promote these languages? So how creative can we be in doing those things, or in achieving those things? Can we use some creative methods which are not only educational in a very, very obvious way, but they're also fun to do? For instance, I have been thinking about performing arts as a way to motivate younger kids to speak their language. What can be done? What kind of activities can they do that are more fun to do? They're educational, but they're not obviously educational. They're not like classroom based, outside the class activities. So those kind of things, I think, can be very, very powerful and effective in language revitalization, storytelling, things like that. I guess that's all for my presentation today. There are some photographs and of the areas where I work. These are my fieldwork areas. Projects like Burshasky, some of the websites here. Some pictures from many years ago. Some of them are in Pakistan from 2003 onwards. These pictures are from my different field trips to different areas of Pakistan and in India. Some of the native speaker consultants, me conducting a workshop in a room. You can see my back in that picture down there, where I was working under curfew in Kashmir. These are some of the outcomes of my work. If you are interested, I've been working on a language called Mankiali, which has about 500 speakers. It's not a written language. So how do we work with a language which has very, very small number of speakers? So each situation is unique in itself. So we have to work in each situation based on what the situation is. I mean, we cannot use the same tools, same approach everywhere. Each situation is unique and different. I cannot use the same tools for Mankiali that I use for Kashmiri, for example. These are different contexts. This language is spoken in a very, very remote area. Most of the speakers are not familiar with or do not have access to these tools. So we cannot use the same tools everywhere. Some workshops that we conducted in different places. This is Islamabad in 2019. It was about 25 attendants for this week-long workshop. Then some more pictures. This workshop was conducted in Chitral in collaboration with Forum for Language Initiatives, or what you call FLI. Then about 20 participants attended this, and the different speakers of different languages. But follow-ups are definitely, this is the most recent workshop that we did in collaboration with FLI in Islamabad this past November. And it was a very good workshop. This is all. This is in Dana village where this language Manchali is spoken. And this is at University of North Texas. Some of the native speakers of these languages working with our students at UNT. There are speakers of Kashmiri, Burushaski, Mankiali in this team, and students from the University of North Texas who are American citizens working together on different projects. And during the pandemic, some pictures from working during the pandemic. So I guess the framework has to be integrative and an integrated approach that needs to be used. Collaboration is paramount. People are eager to document their language, but they're lacking in basic skills and training. That's why I have been focusing more and more on training and capacity building. That's been the focus of my research, my personal goals, research goals, especially in Pakistan and India. I guess that is the end of my presentation. I would like to see if there are any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Munshi. It was wonderful to hear from you, especially the theme of the UN International Mother Language Day this year is using technology for multilingual learner, challenges and opportunities. And your talk, little bit touched upon it, and we really appreciate your expertise and all the wonderful insights and sharing your research with us. So now the floor is open for question and answers. If you have any questions. So I have this question from Diana Rose. She says, please give me some advice regarding the references I should read to conduct documentation and revitalization research. She's from Philippines.
Hold on, I didn't get the question. The person wants to know the difference or what?
Some of the references, if they are interested to work on endangered languages, documentation, revitalization.
Yeah, so if we are if it depends on what's your end, what your end goal and end products are. Just give me 1 second. I want to remove this screen from my. I just have a technical issue on my computer. Just give me. Okay, I am good now. Okay, that's good. So yeah. So depending on. So when I started working doing language documentation, I was especially by the funding agencies, their main focus was documentation and description and preservation of the data. And then people started talking. I came across this language, this phrase somewhere called, which was the archives have become the graveyards of endangered languages. So we're collecting data and depositing or dumping them in these archives. It should not be the case. We have to think about many different aspects of our work, how useful it is. Yeah, it will be good if you can type your question in the chat. In terms of the differences, I don't know. I don't know what to say. Are you talking about technology or methodology, which I briefly mentioned in the beginning about documentation and description? In terms of revitalization, for revitalization, it is mostly effective when conducted and facilitated and also controlled by native speakers. I cannot go and revitalize someone else's language. Um, First of all, I'm not the right person to do that. Um, I don't have the right. I don't know. I don't think I can go and revitalize someone else's language. I won't be an effective person to do that. Um, it has to be led by community members. There are a lot of there are a lot of issues. Technology issues only the one of them, but there are also issues about language ideology, issues about linguistic nationalism that comes in the way of language facilitation of language promotion, especially with respect to the minority groups, and other issues, funding issues, financial aid may not be available for these kind of activities. So a lot of challenges are involved. Unless you have all of these in place, you cannot do any effective revitalization efforts. Language revitalization for linguists, like language experts and linguists, this may not be that kind of an intellectual activity, but it has a direct application. So even
Great.
if, for example, for a linguist, analyzing a language and writing reference books and articles and journal articles may be more intellectually rewarding than producing, for example, language learning books for beginners, which can be done by native speakers very effectively. But they do have to be have to have the right kind of knowledge, right kind of expertise. I do not think that it's unintellectual to do this kind of work. It needs a lot of knowledge about the language, about the technology, about the changing technologies, and what can be the best and effective way to teach. Even though we have a lot of tools available, we have like a flood of information on the internet, and it may not be used in an effective way, even though it's there. There's a lot of information there, a lot of data there. It may not be effectively used. So the effective use of these tools and technologies and the information is what is important. I do not know if I answered your question, but
I
I'll
think
be
that
happy to follow up if you want to talk more.
great. So this leads to a new question from Ilosa Lutau, and she asked why there's a need of revitalization of endangered languages when we human keep creating a new one.
Why is there a need for language revitalization
When we human keep creating new ones?
Oh, that's a very good question. Well, I don't know. I mean, do you want to revitalize your language? If you don't, then don't. There are communities, there are people who do want to revitalize their language, and they have a right to do that. People talk a lot about. I had this very confrontational conversation with someone many years ago when I started working on Burshasky. Why are you documenting these languages? Why do you need to research? Why do you need to do these things? Why don't we have just one common world language? Well, that is also a possibility, but people do want to preserve their identity. They do want to continue to be able to connect with their past, with their culture, and it gives them a sense of safety, to be able to do that. So, and also empowerment. So I think that would be an answer. But honestly, there are certain things that we do because we want to do them, and why not?
Wonderful. Sahar Rauf asked that, do we have a specific keyboard to type Brushaski?
Specific keyboard to write Brushaski?
Brushaski, yeah.
Oh, there are some keyboard helps, but unless we first resolve what symbols to use, there are. I'm very happy that there's been a conversation. We have this very active language activist group of Burushaski speakers who have been talking about it for a long time now. I think they have a committee now, and they've been asking for my feedback as well. And I've been looking at their discussions. They have had a workshop recently, and they're trying to resolve this issue. They are trying to discuss the various problems, and they are also trying to assess whether they should use a Persian-Arabic writing system or Roman-based. They are discussing both proposals. I had actually given two proposals for the Brushaski writing system, trying to resolve the differences between different groups and also trying to remove the redundant symbols, and also an alternate Roman-based alphabet. So there are two proposals that I had worked with my research team. I had a team of research assistants, and we worked on them many years ago, but it was there, just sitting there. It didn't move any further. But we have shared both of these proposals with the community members. They have been discussing their own proposals and our proposal, and they're kind of looking at a solution. And hopefully they will come up with something, and it will be very good to see what they have. And I'm hoping they will have a standardized writing system at some point.
Great. So there's a question from Harvinder from India, and he asks, in revitalization process, is a pictorial dictionary more helpful for community or the language dictionary?
What do you mean by pictorial as opposed to language dictionary? I mean, a dictionary can have pictures as well, right? So you can add pictures to a typical traditional dictionary, and which has been done by many people there. You cannot have pictures for every single thing, but as many words as possible, you can have pictures for many of them, and people are using them. And I think that's a very good tool, additional tool. Dictionaries can be of different types. You can have dictionaries that are very, very basic kind of glossaries, and there can be highly specialized dictionaries. So dictionaries can be of different degrees and levels in terms of how much information they have. So there can be good quality and poor quality dictionaries as well. But I wouldn't say one or the other. Incorporating pictures and audio files, I think audio files are very useful in terms of learning the pronunciation. So audios should be there, definitely. And pictures can be also added for items that belong to certain groups, not everything. You cannot have pictures for every single word in the dictionary. But yes, they're very, very useful tool.
Wonderful. Dr. Kiran Babu would like to know the documentation of endangered languages, language barriers, and how to go about the work in order.
I am sorry, what is the question? Can you?
Well,
Can
yes,
you copy it in the last, what is it?
Well, she says, would like to know about the documentation of endangered language birds and how to go about the work in order. I mean, where to start and what's the process?
That's a very, how to start. It all depends on what your goals are. I started working on Burshasli. My goal was first in 2003. My first goal was to look at the changes that the dialect or sub-dialect of Burshasli in Srinagar has undergone after it separated from the parent dialects in Pakistan, which was in 1890 or 92. And my focus was that. So I modeled my project based on that. But then later on, after some years, I wanted to look at dialectal differences as well, and also document and record them. Because what was available was most of the stuff that was available on Burshasli was in different languages. There was a work in French, there was work in German. It was not accessible for the native speakers of Burshasli. So I wanted to create materials that they could use. So audio and video recordings were my focus in the next phase of my work. So I did a lot of when I was working by myself as a student, and then as a researcher when I started working at UNT. So my initial work was just me. Then I had research assistants after some time, then many native speaker consultants over the years. So audio recordings, video recordings, text collections, those were my focus, depending on what you want to collect and what is the need. So if you have a language which has many, very, very few native speakers left, what kind of information is there that you want to collect first, and what will have value for that language or for the speakers? That would determine the direction of your work or the content of what you are looking at. If you just want to create language materials, learning materials, then you will collect your data accordingly. It depends on what you want to do. If you want to do a linguistic description also, and want to see what other languages this language is related to, you have to do historical comparisons. Then you will collect your data in that area, or focus will be cognates and collecting cognates and doing comparative analyses and other things. So there could be it could be a huge, big project, or it can be a small project depending on what your goals are.
Wonderful. Zafir Hussain Kiani asks, can you give any estimate of Kashmiri speaking population on both sides of the LOC?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I remember the numbers correctly from my memory, there are about 5.6 million speakers total. And these numbers could be higher. I think on the Pakistani side, there's the numbers are much smaller than those in India. I believe 1 lakh or something, but you can easily find this information on the internet. I think a total is 5.6 million speaking. But the younger generation is rapidly shifting to other languages. The youngest generation are not speaking the language, especially in the cities, and people who are moving out and who have already moved. Diaspora, very few people.
Yes, if Roman script is not a standard way to document Nastaliq languages, then how may we disseminate a research to other language groups? Asks Anam Amin.
I'm so sorry, I couldn't get your question. If Roman script what?
If a Roman script is not a standard way to document Nastaliq languages, then how can we disseminate a research for, to the other language groups?
I didn't say that. I didn't say that Roman. So there are two things. When you talk about Roman script, Roman script can be used in a very effective way if you don't imitate English spelling. You don't have to imitate English spelling. You can use Roman script very, very effectively if you determine the value of each symbol and just standardize it. It's much easier to use Roman-based alphabet I find it much more easier And many of my team members, most of my team members, they also will agree with me that Roman alphabet, if we use that in a standardized way, then it is much more user-friendly, effective in terms of technology also, like in terms of its dissemination in and what is it called? Interconnected use or interoperability between different devices. So it you could also use Perso-Arabic, but you have to make sure that everybody is using the same diacritics and they are using them. Many people are just omitting them. They don't type them or they don't enter them. They just omit them and then it becomes a problem. And then they are using, for a language like Kashmiri, which has central vowels like how do you use them? How do you say that? How do you write that? So it's not easy to write these kind of symbols in Perso-Arabic, these kind of sounds. So it has been a major issue for speakers of Kashmiri, for example. They're not using these diacritics in a very consistent way, and they're finding it very difficult to learn as well. The younger generation, they're very, very resistant to learning these diacritics or the writing system at all.
Great. Dr. Amir Zahir asked, what are the main linguistic features of Dardic languages?
So Dardic languages are considered a group of languages that have developed certain features over time, primarily because of language contact. They may be Indo-Aryan languages. Most of them are, I guess, all of them are now considered as Indo-Aryan languages. There used to be a group of languages that was also termed as Dardic, but they are no longer described as Dardic languages. So Dardic languages have some features, for example, loss of aspirated aspiration in voiced consonants. For example, bha become ba in these languages. Then there's also, some of them have dental affricates like sa. Then there's also some sounds that are sh and sa have become ha. It's not very consistent through these languages. To be honest with you, much research needs to be done on this group of languages. Many people have just replicated the same story over and over again, and a lot more research needs to be done on what exactly counts as, if there is Dardic as what does the Dardic term mean? What are those features? A bundle of features are described for any linguistic area. When we talk about aerial languages, which belong to a group because of language contact, not necessarily because of genetic relationship. So if a number of languages develop similar features because of contact over time, they are called an aerial linguistic group. And they share what we call a bundle of linguistic features that are common among them. There could be subgroups within that group that share more features than others. So I do not know of any study which has, any extensive study which has worked on these features very extensively. I am not aware of any. There are a number of languages that are bunched in this group, and I think more research needs to be done on what exactly is there and what are the features that are shared. There are these few features, but then they could be in other languages as well.
Maybe this one last question from Akramullah, and he asks, how can we differentiate between endangered and vulnerable languages? Or what qualifies a language to be an endangered language? What should be the minimum?
It's basically different terms are used based on the degree and level of impact. So we use terms like vulnerable, endangered, and under-resourced, things like that, based on there are other terms also. I cannot remember right now. There are more terms. So vulnerable and endangered, it's just a matter of degrees of endangerment. So when we use the term endangered, it's a little higher level than vulnerable, probably. It's just a matter of degrees of endangerment. There's not much difference other than that.
And Dr. Sadaf Munshi, we are very thankful and indebted to you for your time and expertise. Thank you very much for this wonderful talk. And in this last, any message for our teachers, our scholars, as we celebrate our International Mother Language Day webinar series?
Thank you, Shukriya. I can say something in my mother language, which is Kashmiri.
Sure. Go ahead.
But I don't know, are there any Kashmiri speakers in the group?
But we love it.
मैं चुनाव Sadaf Munshi, which is Roseanne, Texas. مےٚ چھِ واریاہ خوشی کہِ تۄہہِ دِتِو مےٚ آز موقعہٕ یتھ ویبِنارس منٛز حصہٕ نیُن.
بہترین.
So mother tongue is called Maji Zev in Kashmiri. Maji Zev. Zev is tongue.
In Sindhi, we say Madri Boli or Ma Boli.
Okay.
Thank you very much for this wonderful talk. And for everyone who is interested to open certificate for this talk, you can email us at info.tdwebinars@gmail.com. For our future webinars, you can look at our website www.tdwebinars.org. We are available on all our social media channels, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. And this recording will be available at Teacher Development Webinars YouTube channel if you want to share. And yeah, our Twitter handle is @tdwebinars. Please don't forget to tag us and with your takeaways from the talk. And yeah, thanks very much. Till then, take care. Bye bye.